The tar-ink slave market on station. Omega-7 smelled like despair and disinfectant. Captain James Chen stood at the edge of the holding pens, his two daughters pressed against his legs, and tried not to let his disgust show on his face. The collective ambassador who'd brought him here, a blob-like being named Gorthax, gestured expansively at the rows of alien women behind the force fields. Each one marked with a price tag, an identification number. "Pick any alien woman," Gorthax said in his gurgling voice, the translator rendering it into flat standard. "Your credit is good here, Captain Chen. The collective rewards its heroes. After what you did at the Meridian blockade, saving 3 collective worlds, you've earned this. Take your pick. A companion, a servant, whatever you need. We know humans prefer. Organic relationships, consider it a bonus for your service." James felt his jaw tighten. This wasn't a reward, this was a test. The collective wanted to see if humans were like them, if we'd participate in their casual slavery, their commodification of sentient beings. They'd been watching humanity for 3 years since we joined the galactic community, trying to figure out what made us tick, whether we were really as strange as the rumors suggested. His daughters, Emma and Lily, 7 and 5 years old respectively, didn't understand the full horror of what they were seeing. They'd been sheltered from the worst of galactic society, raised on a clean transport ship where their father served as a cargo hauler before the war had made him a reluctant hero. They thought this was like the animal shelters back on Earth, places where you could adopt creatures that needed homes. James had tried to explain on the way here in terms they could understand, that these women weren't animals, weren't for sale, weren't supposed to be here at all. But how do you explain slavery to children who'd never seen it, who came from a species that had abolished it centuries ago and still carried the shame of ever having practiced it? "Ambassador," James said carefully, his hand resting protectively on Emma's shoulder, "I appreciate the gesture, but I can't accept." "On Earth, we don't." Of course," Gorthax interrupted, his translator somehow capturing what might have been amusement. "Human sensibilities, we've heard, but Captain, be practical. You're a single father. Your wife died 3 years ago in that transport accident. You need help with the children. These females are trained, docile, excellent with young. And before you protest, remember, they're here regardless of your choice. You taking one changes nothing about the system, but it changes everything for her. Would you rather she go to a krill mining operation, a Vex pleasure house? At least with you she'd be treated well. We know humans are." Soft, the logic was poisonous, designed to make complicity seem like compassion. James had heard it before, variations of it, throughout history. Good people doing nothing. Good people participating in evil systems because refusing seemed pointless. He was about to refuse again, more firmly, when he felt Lily's small hand tugging at his jacket. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice that particular tone that meant she was about to cry. "They're sad." "All of them are so sad." Emma, always the more verbal of the two, added quietly, "Can we help them, Daddy, like you helped those planets?" And there it was, the impossible question. The kind of question children asked because they didn't understand the complexity, the politics, the reality that one man couldn't change a system. Except that was a lie adults told themselves, wasn't it? Throughout human history, individual choices had mattered, individual resistance, individual refusal to participate. James knelt down to his daughter's level, one hand on each small shoulder. "Listen to me," he said softly. "What's happening here is wrong. These women aren't things to be bought and sold. They're people with thoughts and feelings and families who probably miss them. Back on Earth, we learned a long time ago that owning another person is one of the worst things someone can do. Do you understand?" Emma nodded seriously. Lily's lower lip trembled. "But you can't save them all, can you, Daddy?" "No, sweetheart. I can't, but you could save one," Emma said, her 7-year-old logic cutting straight to the heart of it. "And wouldn't that matter?" "To that one," Gorthax made a sound that might have been a laugh. From the mouths of younglings, smart children, Captain, they understand practical kindness. Your human philosophies are admirable, but in the real galaxy, sometimes small mercies are all we can offer. James wanted to argue, wanted to explain that participating in the system, even to save one, validated the system. But how could he explain that to his daughters when they were looking at him with those eyes, the ones that still believed Daddy could fix anything, could make the hard choices that adults had to make? He stood up slowly, looking at the force field pens. Dozens of alien women, maybe hundreds in this facility. Tarinx, Vel'kari, Sarathi, species he didn't even recognize. All of them with the same hollow look in their eyes, the look of people who'd given up hope. If I did this, he said slowly, if I participated in this horror show, it would be to free someone not to own them. She'd be free to leave the moment we left this station. Free to go wherever she wanted. That's not what you're offering, is it, Ambassador? Contractually, purchases are binding for. Then I'm not interested, James said flatly. Emma, Lily were leaving. He turned toward the exit, his daughter's hands in his, when Lily suddenly stopped. Her grip tightened on his fingers and she made a small sound, halfway between a gasp and a sob. Daddy, she whispered, and there was something in her voice he'd never heard before, recognition. Daddy, that one? Emma's head whipped around to where her sister was pointing. Her eyes went wide. Daddy, she breathed, it's her. James felt ice water flood his veins. He turned slowly, following his daughter's gaze to a holding pen in the far corner, partially obscured by the others. And there, pressed against the back wall as if trying to disappear, was a Vel'kari female. Purple-blue skin, 3 eyes, the characteristic elegant build of her species. But it wasn't just any Vel'kari, it was Zara. The universe stopped, time stopped. James Chen, veteran of a dozen space battles, survivor of impossible odds, hero of the Meridian blockade, felt his knees almost give out. 3 years. 3 years since the transport accident that had killed his wife and supposedly destroyed the diplomatic shuttle carrying Zara. The Vel'kari cultural liaison who'd been teaching his daughters her language, her songs, her stories. 3 years since the girls had cried themselves to sleep for weeks, mourning both their mother and their beloved teacher. 3 years since James had filed the reports, attended the memorials, tried to help his children heal. And here she was, in a slave market, wearing the marks of someone who'd been in captivity far too long. Captain Chen, Gorthax's voice seemed to come from very far away. You recognize this merchandise? Merchandise. The word sent rage flooding through James, hot and sharp and dangerous. But he forced it down, forced himself to think. This was a trap, had to be, the collective knew. They'd brought him here specifically to show him this, to test him, to see what humans would do when the theoretical became personal. Zara, he said quietly, and saw her 3 eyes focus on him, saw the moment she recognized him, saw hope and fear and shame war across her elegant features. James, she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse or screaming or both. No, you shouldn't be here, you should. We thought you were dead, Emma said, her voice breaking. We had a funeral. Daddy played the song you taught us. Lily was crying now, pressing her face against James's leg. Why are you in the cage? Why are you sad? Daddy, why is she in the cage? Gorthax was watching this with evident interest, his blob-like form quivering in what might have been amusement or anticipation. Ah, he gurgled. This is fascinating. You know this one? How? Convenient. The price is standard, of course, no discounts for personal connection. James's mind was racing. This was absolutely a setup. The collective had done this deliberately, testing to see if humans would compromise their principles for personal connections. But why? What did they gain from proving humans were hypocrites like everyone else? Unless that wasn't the test at all. He thought about the past 3 years, about every interaction with the collective, every time human behavior had confused them, alarmed them, made them reassess their assumptions. Humans who fought for strangers, Humans who kept promises that cost them everything. Humans who chose the hard right over the easy wrong. The collective didn't understand it. They thought it was weakness or perhaps an elaborate deception. They were predators and prey, users and used, buyers and bought. The concept of genuine altruism baffled them. So they'd created this scenario. If James walked away from a stranger, they could say humans were principled but cold. If he bought Zara because he knew her, they could say humans only helped their own. Either way, they won, but there was a third option, the human option. James looked down at his daughters. "Emma, Lily, what did I teach you about what's right and what's easy?" "The right thing is usually hard," Emma recited. "But you do it anyway because that's what makes you good." "And what did I teach you about helping people?" Lily sniffled. "You help because they need help, not because of who they are." "Good girls," James said softly. Then he turned to Gorthax. "Ambassador, I need to make a call." "To Earth, Captain, the purchase is a simple transaction you don't need." "I'm not making a purchase," James said. "I'm making a statement. Please connect me to the Terran Diplomatic Corps." Priority channel. What happened next would become the stuff of legend in human space and a cautionary tale in collective territories. James Chen, with his two daughters standing beside him, broadcasting every moment on their child-safe recording devices. Because of course Emma had hers. She recorded everything, made a call that went directly to the Terran ambassador to the collective. On a live feed that his daughter's inadvertent broadcast made public across human networks. "Ambassador Williams," James said when the connection established, "I'm at a collective slave market on Omega-7. They brought me here as a reward for my service. I need to report a crime." "Captain Chen," Williams replied, her face carefully neutral. "What crime would that be?" "Slavery of a sentient being. Specifically, a Vel'kari cultural liaison named Zara who was reported dead 3 years ago, but is very much alive and being held for sale." "But Ambassador, she's not the only one. There are hundreds here, maybe thousands across collective space, and we know about it. Humanity knows. We've always known. Captain, the collective's internal affairs are about to become our external problem," James interrupted, "because I'm not leaving this station without Zara. And I'm not buying her, I'm liberating her. And if the collective has a problem with that, they can take it up with Earth, all of Earth, who I imagine is watching this right now." He was right. Emma's innocent recording, automatically backed up to the family cloud, automatically shared with her school friends' network, had already gone viral. Millions of humans were watching. The collective had created this moment to test one man. Instead, they'd put humanity itself on trial, and humanity was done pretending slavery was someone else's problem. Ambassador Williams's face hardened. "Captain Chen, I'm authorizing immediate extraction. A Terran strike team will be at your location in 20 minutes. In the meantime, I'm officially notifying the collective that humanity demands the immediate release of all sentient beings held in bondage in collective space." "Ambassador Williams," Gorthax interrupted, his voice losing its amused tone, "you cannot seriously be threatening military action over." "I'm not threatening," Williams said coldly. "I'm notifying. You brought Captain Chen to that market. You thought you were testing him, testing us, seeing if we'd compromise. You forgot something important about humans. We already made these mistakes. We already went down this road. We know exactly where it leads. And we swore as a species never again, not to us." "Not to anyone. You're one species among dozens," Gorthax sputtered. "You can't dictate morality to the entire collective." "Watch us," James said quietly. Then louder for the recording for the millions watching. "My name is James Chen. I'm a father, a cargo hauler, and apparently a hero, though I've never felt like one. But I know what heroes do. They don't make compromises with evil. They don't participate in systems of oppression. They don't walk away because the fight is too big or too hard or too expensive." He knelt down again between his daughters. "Emma, Lily, Do you remember what Zara taught you? About the Vel'kari concept of Theron? The choice that defines, Emma said softly. Every person faces moments, James continued, still looking at his daughters but speaking to the camera, to the galaxy, where they have to choose who they are. The collective thought this was my moment. They were wrong. This is humanity's moment, and we choose to be the species that says no, no to slavery, no to oppression. No to treating sentient beings like property, no even when it's hard, no even when it costs us, no because that's what humans do. He stood up, facing Gorthax. So here's what's going to happen, Ambassador. I'm walking into that holding pen. I'm getting Zara, and then I'm getting every other being in this facility. And you're going to let me, because if you don't, you're going to find out why the Meridian blockade wasn't about superior tactics or better weapons. You're going to find out that humans fight differently when we're fighting for what's right instead of what's profitable. You're insane, Gorthax said. Even if you free everyone here, there are hundreds of markets across collective space. Thousands of facilities. You can't. Can't we? James smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. Ambassador, you've been watching humanity for 3 years. You know what we're capable of. You know we don't quit. You know we don't accept the unacceptable. You brought me here to prove humans were hypocrites. Instead, you just gave us a cause. And humans with a cause, we're unstoppable. The force field on Zara's pen flickered and died. James looked around to see a human technician in Terran military fatigues standing at the control panel, a tight smile on her face. "Strike teams early, sir," she said. "Figured you might need backup." "How many?" James asked. "All of us, sir, every human on this station. We saw the broadcast." "We're done pretending this isn't our problem." What followed was later called the Omega-7 incident, though humans preferred to call it the first liberation. Every slave, every being held in bondage in that facility, walked out free that day. The collective tried to stop it, tried to enforce their property rights, tried to argue law and order and jurisdiction. But humans don't respect laws that permit slavery. Humans don't recognize property rights over people. And when the collective sent security forces, they found themselves facing not just Captain Chen and his daughters, but 300 human civilians and military personnel who decided that some things were worth fighting for. The collective backed down, not because they couldn't win the fight, though the humans were prepared to make it very, very costly, but because the entire human species was watching. And behind Earth stood the most terrifying military force the galaxy had seen in centuries. A species that had studied war for 10,000 years, that had refined conflict to an art form, that had climbed out of violent history specifically so they'd never have to go back, but would go back instantly if they saw evil that needed fighting. Zara walked out of that facility between Emma and Lily, each girl holding one of her hands. James walked behind them, carrying a Sarathi child whose parents had been sold to separate markets. Around them, hundreds of freed beings followed, blinking in the station's bright lights, unable to quite believe they were free. "You didn't have to do this," Zara said quietly. "You risked everything. Your career, your standing with the collective, your daughter's safety." "Zara," James interrupted gently, "you taught my daughters the most beautiful songs in the galaxy. You held them when they cried for their mother. You were family. Did you really think I'd leave you in a cage? But the others," she gestured at the crowd following them, "you didn't know them. They weren't your responsibility." "Yes," James said simply. "They were, because I'm human, and humans don't get to pick and choose who deserves freedom. Either everyone deserves it or no one does." "That's not morality, that's just math." Emma looked up at Zara. "Are you going to stay with us now?" "Daddy said you could go anywhere, but I really hope you stay." Zara's 3 eyes filled with tears, a very human response she'd picked up from the girls. I don't know where to go. I've been gone 3 years. My family probably thinks I'm dead." "Then let's find them," James said. And then, if you want, we'll find everyone else's families too. Because that's what we do now, apparently. Fix the unfixable, help the helpless, be inconveniently moral. You're going to make enemies, Zara warned. The collective won't forgive this. Good, James said. I'd hate to be friends with slavers. The broadcast ended with an image that would become iconic. Captain James Chen, a human father, walking through a space station corridor, surrounded by freed slaves of a dozen species. His daughters skipping ahead with their Vel'kari teacher. Behind him, 300 humans who decided that the right thing was more important than the easy thing. The collective never brought humans to slave markets again. Not because they stopped trading in slaves. That took another year and a very pointed conversation involving the entire Terran fleet, but because they learned that humans were allergic to injustice. Show a human a problem and they'd try to fix it. Show a human suffering and they'd try to end it. Show a human evil and they'd fight it, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. 3 months after the Omega-7 incident, the Terran Diplomatic Corps officially proposed the Sentient Rights Act to the Collective Assembly. It banned slavery, indentured servitude, and trafficking of any sentient being across all collective space. The punishment for violation was severe: immediate economic sanctions and, if necessary, military intervention by a coalition of species who agreed with humanity's position. To everyone's surprise, the act passed. Not because most species agreed with human morality, but because they'd seen what happened when humans decided something was a moral imperative. They'd seen Omega-7. They'd seen 300 civilians ready to fight professional security forces over strangers. They'd seen a species that would rather burn the galaxy down than accept evil as normal. And they decided it was easier to ban slavery than to fight humanity over it. 2 years after that, Zara stood in the Terran embassy on Unity Station, the renamed and rebuilt Omega-7, and watched James Chen receive the Galactic Peace Prize. Not for the Meridian blockade, but for what he'd started that day in the slave market. The domino effect that had freed millions, the cultural revolution that had changed the galaxy. You know what the funny thing is? She said to Ambassador Williams, who stood beside her. The collective thought they were testing him. They thought they were being clever. They were, Williams agreed, just not clever enough. What do you mean? They showed a human father a cage. They should have known what would happen. Humans don't like cages, not for ourselves, not for anyone. On the stage, Emma and Lily stood beside their father, now 9 and 7, as he gave his acceptance speech. They'd insisted on being there, just like they'd insisted on being at every liberation since. The girls who'd started a revolution because they missed their teacher and couldn't understand why anyone would put a person in a cage. I don't deserve this, James was saying. I didn't do anything special. I just did what any human would do. What any decent being would do. I saw someone who needed help, someone who mattered to my daughters, someone who mattered, period. And I helped. He paused, looking out at the assembly of dozens of species. The collective asked me to pick any alien woman. They thought they were offering me a gift. What they actually did was remind humanity of what we'd once been, what we'd sworn never to be again. And they reminded us that just because we'd fixed our own mistakes didn't mean we got to ignore everyone else's. Humans are strange, he continued. We know this. We're violent and peaceful, rational and emotional, selfish and selfless. We contradict ourselves constantly. But there's one thing we're consistent about. We don't accept cruelty as inevitable. We don't shrug at injustice. We don't walk away from cages just because we didn't build them. He knelt down, one arm around each daughter. My girls asked me a simple question that day. Can we help them, Daddy? And I realized the answer wasn't about politics or economics or galactic relations. It was just yes, because that's what humans do. We help, even when it's hard. Even when it costs us, even when the whole galaxy thinks we're crazy. Emma leaned into the microphone. We're not crazy, she said seriously. We just don't like cages, Lily nodded. Nobody should be in cages, it's mean. The assembly erupted in applause, some species genuinely moved, others simply recognizing good politics when they saw it. But Zara wasn't watching them. She was watching James, remembering the day he'd walked into that market, remembering the moment he'd knelt down and asked his daughters what was right. Later, after the ceremony, after the congratulations and the speeches and the formal dinner, James found her on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "You know," she said quietly, "I never thanked you properly for what you did, for what you risked." "You don't need to thank me," James said. "You were family, you are family. But the others, the thousands who came after, they weren't family." James was quiet for a moment. Then, "Zara, you taught my daughters that every being has worth, that every life matters. That kindness is the only currency that really counts. Did you think I wasn't listening? I taught them Vel'kari philosophy, ancient wisdom. You taught them to be good people, to see others as people. That's not ancient wisdom, Zara, that's just wisdom. And when they saw you in that cage, when they recognized you, they weren't just saving their teacher. They were living what you taught them. That connection matters, that people matter, all people. Even the ones you don't know. Especially the ones we don't know," James said. "Because that's when helping is hardest, when there's no personal benefit, no reward, just the knowledge that you did the right thing." Zara turned to face him. "The galaxy is different now because of what you did. The galaxy is different because my daughters asked a question I couldn't ignore," James corrected. "And because 300 humans heard me answer it and decided they agreed. And because millions more saw what we did and decided they wanted to be part of it. I didn't change anything, Zara. I just stopped pretending I couldn't." "Is that the human secret?" Zara asked. "Just refusing to pretend you can't help?" "Maybe," James smiled. "That and having daughters who believe you can fix anything." "Very motivating, that." Emma and Lily burst onto the observation deck at that moment, followed by a group of young beings from a dozen species, the children of people freed at Omega-7 and the other markets that had fallen after. "Daddy," Emma called. "Zara, come on, they're going to light the memorial." The memorial. For everyone who died in bondage before humans decided to do something about it. Millions of names. Millions of lives that had ended in cages. James took Lily's hand. Zara took Emma's. Together they walked toward the ceremony, surrounded by the children of a freer galaxy. "Daddy," Lily said as they walked, "when I grow up, I want to help people like you do." "Me too," Emma added. "Is that okay?" James felt his throat tighten. "That's more than okay, sweetheart." "That's perfect." "Will it be hard?" Lily asked. "Probably," James admitted. "Important things usually are." "But we'll do it anyway," Emma said confidently. "Because that's what humans do." And she was right. That was what humans did. What they'd always done when they were at their best. See a problem and fix it. See suffering and end it. See a cage and break it. Not because it was easy. Not because it was profitable. Not even because it was rational. But because it was right. And sometimes that was the only reason that mattered. The memorial lighting was beautiful. Thousands of floating lights, each one representing a life lost to slavery, rising into the station's artificial sky. Emma and Lily released theirs together. Two small lights joining the river of thousands, millions across the galaxy who were doing the same thing at the same moment. James stood with his arm around Zara, watching his daughters, and thought about the question Gorthax had asked him that day in the market. "Pick any alien woman," he'd said, as if they were objects. As if they were things. He'd picked Zara, but not the way the collective had meant. He'd picked her to save, he'd picked her to free, and in doing so he'd picked every being in that market. Every slave in the collective, every person the galaxy had decided didn't matter. Because that was the thing about humans. When you asked us to pick, we picked everyone. We picked freedom. We picked dignity, we picked justice, and we didn't stop picking until everyone had it. "Daddy," Lily whispered, leaning against his leg, "look how many lights there are." I know, baby. That's a lot of people who were sad. Yes, but they're not sad anymore, right? Because of what you did. James knelt down, pulling both girls into a hug. No, sweetheart, they're gone. We can't save them, but we can make sure no one else ends up like them. We can make sure their deaths meant something. That's what the lights are for, to remember, to promise we'll do better. We will, Emma said fiercely. We're humans. We always do better. And watching his daughters' faces in the glow of a million memorial lights, watching Zara wipe away tears. Watching the galaxy honor the dead and promise the living a better future, James Chen allowed himself to believe it. Humans would do better, because that's what they did. They saw cages and broke them. They saw suffering and ended it. They saw their children's faces and tried to be worthy of their faith. Pick any alien woman, the collective had said. He'd pick them all, and that made all the difference.